Hi, welcome to Lies and Secrets channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. The evening air was thick as I made my way along the familiar route to the stable, its coldness piercing through my jacket, tightening around my shoulders. My fingers clung to the edges of my coat pockets. Knuckles bleached white as if the action alone could anchor me. I didn't usually take such extended walks to visit Charlie at this hour. But tonight, following the brief call from Theodore, his terse tone, the all-too-casual "I'll be late again," I found myself unable to sit till. I had tried to wait, told myself to be patient, but the silence of the house felt overwhelmingly loud, unbearably empty. Theodore hadn't always been this way. Years ago, when I first fell for him, he was attentive and playful, the kind of man who made me feel visible. He used to find small ways to express his affection, like slipping notes into my lunch bag or calling just to say he missed me. Those gestures once seemed like a promise, a quiet assurance that he'd always choose me. Now, he seemed like a shadow of that man, distant and elusive, leaving me clinging to fragments of memories, trying to recall what that love once felt like. As I finally reached the stable, it stood as a warm refuge against the growing darkness. My pace quickened as I drew closer, eager for the solace I knew awaited me. The familiar creak of the door welcomed me as I pushed it open, and the scent of hay, leather, and Charlie's earthy aroma wrapped around me. This smell had become synonymous with tranquility, grounding me, a stark contrast to the tension at home. Stepping inside, I immediately saw him. Charlie was by the edge of his stall, his dark eyes gentle and knowing in the subdued light. He let out a soft nicker as I approached, a tender greeting that pulled at my heartstrings. I moved toward him, reaching out instinctively to run my fingers through his coat, absorbing the heat from his body. My shoulders started to unwind, the inner tumult gradually subsiding. "Hey, Max," I whispered so softly, almost as if speaking to the night itself. "Looks like it's just you and me again tonight." He dipped his head, pressing into my caress, and for an instant a tenderness swelled within me, as if he truly grasped the burden I bore. I rested my forehead against his neck, my fingers weaving through his mane, and I shut my eyes, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding back. "It's like he doesn't even see me anymore," I confessed in a hushed tone, the words spilling out unchecked. I had thought it was just a rough spot, something we'd get past. But months had rolled by, months of him coming home late, missing dinners, offering excuses. A lump formed in my throat, tears threatening to escape as the thought of him being with someone else twisted like a knife in my heart. I had tried to ignore such thoughts, attributing them to my own insecurities, convincing myself it was all in my head. Yet the silence that stretched between us had bloomed into something undeniable, and with each day it seemed I was losing more of him. Charlie nudged my shoulder with his nose, pulling me back from the brink of my sorrow. A weak laugh escaped me as I wiped a tear, turning my attention back to him. "You always seem to know just what to say." "Ha," I said softly, stroking his muzzle. It might seem absurd, confiding my deepest heartaches to a beautiful horse's. But in doing so I found an unexpected solace, understood in a way that had been absent for too long. I continued to stroke his coat, the soothing motions of brushing easing my rattled nerves. In these moments, Charlie was my one constant, the solid ground in my life. As Theodore drifted further away, holding on to my time with Charlie became my lifeline, an anchor of stability. I couldn't risk losing. Maybe I'm just overthinking it all. I mused, though the words rang hollow. Maybe things will return to how they once were. Perhaps I just need to be patient. Charlie exhaled sharply, as if sensing my doubt, and a small smile crept across my face. Although he couldn't comprehend the full weight of my words, his quiet companionship was comforting, more reassuring than any reassurance Theodore had offered in recent months. I lingered with him, letting the steady cadence of his breaths coax me into a state of tranquility rarely felt these days. When I eventually left the stable, the night had deepened, stars twinkling faintly against the dark canvas of the sky. I gave Charlie one final look, filled with a bittersweet gratitude. He was my sanctuary, my haven. Amid the turmoil as I walked back home, I couldn't help but feel that no matter what unfolded with Theodore, Charlie would always be there, a steady presence waiting for me in the quiet. In the days to come, Theodore's continual absences solidified each late return and vague excuse, drawing us further apart. He'd arrive home well past dinner time, his shirt crumpled. I'd darting away as he muttered an apology and sidestepped me. I'd find myself waiting in the dimly lit silence of our kitchen, hoping for any sign, any connection to cling to. But night after night, he'd sink deeper into his shell, erecting a barrier I couldn't penetrate. The mornings brought no reprieve. He'd rush through breakfast, his attention fixed on his phone, barely acknowledging my attempts at conversation. He once claimed I was his morning sunshine, essential to starting his day, but now it seemed as if I had vanished from his perception. I tried engaging him even in minimal conversation, but his responses were terse, as if my words were an inconvenience. He couldn't bear one sleepless morning I reached my breaking point. Standing in the kitchen as he poured his coffee, seemingly a million miles away. I felt a surge of heated, desperate words rise within me. Theodore, I blurted out, sharper than intended. "Do you even notice me anymore?" He looked up, surprised, his face a mask of indifference. "What?" My throat tightened, but I pressed on. "You're never here, and when you are, it's like I'm invisible. I don't understand what's happening, but I feel like I'm losing you." There was a flicker in his eyes, perhaps a hint of guilt or regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He sighed, setting down his mug. "Audrey, it's just work's been really intense lately," he muttered, running a hand over his face. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this right now," and with that he was gone, leaving me alone with a heart heavy with anger and sorrow. His words echoed back a stark reminder of the diminishing space I held in his life. He seemed indifferent to my pain, oblivious to my desperate attempts to understand what went wrong. That evening, after another call about being late, I found myself walking to the stable, not even bothering with a coat. I needed an escape from the suffocating void of our home. The path to Charlie was my lifeline, a pull I couldn't resist. As I approached, he was there waiting, his head high. As he watched me come near, I exhaled shakily, feeling the day's burdens descend upon me. As I approached him, he greeted me with a soft nicker, his touch gentle, reassuring. I leaned against him, my fingers buried in his mane. As the tears began to fall, "I'm so tired." "Charlie," I whispered, my voice a mere breath. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." He pressed his head against my shoulder, his presence grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in ages, as I traced patterns along his coat. The softness of his fur was a salve to my aching heart. He didn't have answers or solutions, but his quiet company was enough. I stayed with him for hours, brushing his coat, feeding him treats, losing myself in the simple rhythmic tasks that calmed my mind in the stillness of the stable. I could release the pain, the doubt, the growing fear that I was losing everything dear to me. Charlie was my sanctuary, my steadiness in a world that seemed to be unraveling. As I ran my fingers through his mane, I realized I felt more recognized, more valued in these silent moments with him than I had in my own home for months. Each day I found myself drawn back to him, staying in the stable long after sunset, finding solace in his steady presence. I felt secure, a sensation long absent. But even as I held on to Charlie, a part of me knew that something inside was fracturing, a reality I couldn't ignore forever. His phone rested on the bedside table, lighting up as a new message arrived. My heart raised as I glimpsed the text from an unknown number. "Thanks for tonight, let's do it again." Soon the words swam before my eyes, unleashing a flood of hurt and rage within me. My hands trembled as I read and reread the message, struggling to process it. I had sensed something. Amiss, felt it deep in my bones, but confronting this evidence felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. My head reeled, my breath short as 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Was there another woman? How long had it been going on? Did he even care about us anymore? Unable to bear the sight of his phone, I fled the room, my mind a whirlwind of pain and betrayal. Instinctively, I grabbed my coat and made my way to the stable. Charlie was there as always, his kind eyes watching me as I stumbled toward him, tears blurring my vision. I buried my face in his mane, releasing a muffled sob. I'm such a fool. Charlie. I choked out my voice, quivering as I clung to him, my fingers twisted in his mane. How could he do this? How could he just abandon me like this? Charlie shifted slightly, his warm breath comforting against my cheek. I lingered there for hours, pouring out my sorrow, frustration, and sense of betrayal. As dawn broke, I felt drained yet oddly serene, as if I had expelled some of the crushing weight from my C*******. Charlie had been my rock, my steadfast companion through the night, and I realized I couldn't be without his quiet strength. A few days later, I reached out to my best friend, Emma. I hadn't seen her in weeks, too embarrassed to admit how bad things had gotten with Theodore. But now, with everything laid bare, I needed support. When Emma arrived that evening, she brought wine, ice cream, and a warmth only a true friend could offer. We sat on the porch, the cool evening air enveloping us as I recounted everything about the text, the growing distance, the lonely nights. She listened intently, her expression darkening with each detail. "Oh, Audrey," she sighed, squeezing my hand. "You deserve so much better than this. You loved him, but this isn't love anymore." Is it her words sliced through me? Painful yet true. I gazed down at my wine glass, feeling an empty ache in my C*******T. I don't know who he is anymore. Emma, he was my best friend, and now he's just a stranger. Emma nodded, her gaze softening. But you have Charlie, right? You've been spending a lot of time with him. A faint smile touched my lips as I thought of the countless hours in the stable, the quiet solace I found in Charlie's company. Yeah, he's the only thing keeping me sane right now. It sounds silly, but being with him feels real, like he understands me, even if he can't speak. Emma's eyes twinkle and she tilted her head thoughtfully. Then I think it's time I met this knight in shining armor of yours. Let's go to the stable. As we walked toward the stable, Emma's sympathetic gaze met mine and she asked, "How do you handle being alone so much?" I'd go crazy with frustration. A sly smile crossed my lips. Well, I found other ways to be satisfied. Charlie, I added, my cheeks flushing. As I described our encounters, Emma leaned in intrigued. He's been very attentive. Excitement built as we approached the stable, the night air crisp, our laughter echoing in the dark. Our yoga pants hugged our figures as we entered the warm wooden interior of the stable, the scent of leather and hay enveloping us. What followed was a night neither Emma nor I would ever forget. Back home, the thick, stifling air pressed down as I waited for Theodore's return, the silence heavy like a shroud. I had rehearsed my words all day, turning them over in my mind until they felt like armor tonight. I was determined to confront him, to unleash everything I'd bottled up, the pain, the doubts, the desperate need for truth. As the clock ticked past 10:15 p.m., my heart pounded, fear, mingling with rising anger at the possibility that he might not return. But just as despair nearly overtook me, I heard his car pull into the driveway. I stood in a doorway, watching as he entered. His coat shrugged off his gaze, flitting from me to the cold, untouched dinner behind me. "Audrey," he began, his voice tentative, avoiding my eyes. "I'm sorry. I know I said I'd be home earlier, but don't I?" interrupted, my voice trembling. Despite my attempt to sound resolute, I took a deep breath, steadying myself before meeting his eyes. "Theodore, we need to talk. I can't keep doing this. Whatever this is, I need answers." I insisted, my voice firmer than ever, as he shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Look, Audrey, I'm tired and it's been a long day. Can we talk about this tomorrow?" he replied, rubbing his hand over his face wearily. "No." I asserted, my tone unwavering. "We've put this off for too long. I stand here night after night, waiting for you to come home, hoping you'll finally explain what's going on, but you never do. You just disappear, leaving me wondering if I even matter to you anymore." My words hung heavy in the air, and I watched as his expression shifted, a fleeting glimpse of guilt flickering in his eyes before he turned away, pacing to the other side of the room. Inside, I felt a storm of frustration, sadness, and desperation. Brewing. Audrey. He finally said, his voice strained. It's not that simple. Work has been overwhelming. There's pressure, deadlines, things you wouldn't understand. I'm just trying to keep it all together. Then why shut me out? I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. Why do you leave me here night after night without a word? Why can't you even look at me when you walk through the door? He stopped, pacing, his back still to me, and let out a long sigh. 'Cause I don't have the energy. Audrey, I don't have the energy to come home and deal with what I demanded. My frustration boiling over with me with your wife, who's been here waiting, wondering if she's enough. Do you have any idea what that feels like, Theodore, to be treated like an afterthought? He turned to face me, his eyes hardening. And do you have any idea what it's like to be constantly under pressure, feeling like you're never good enough, like you're failing every day? The words stung, but I held my ground. Then let me in, Theodore, let me help you. That's what marriage is supposed to be, isn't it? Facing things together. But you haven't given me a chance. You've pushed me away, kept me in the dark. He shook his head, looking away again. Maybe I just needed space. Audrey. Maybe I needed time to figure things out on my own without feeling like I was letting you down. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I searched his face, looking for a glimmer of the man. I'd fallen in love with the man who had once promised he'd always be there, but he seemed like a stranger, now distant and closed off. I took a shaky breath, fighting back tears. Do you even want this anymore? Theodore? Do you even want us? He didn't answer immediately, and the silence felt like a knife cutting through me. He glanced at me. His face softened, a flicker of regret in his eyes, but still he couldn't bring himself to say the words I needed to hear. Instead, he let out a long sigh, running a hand through his hair, struggling to find the right words. Audrey. I don't know, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know what I want right now. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, everything I'd held on to crumbling around me. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door, the sting of his silence following me as I stepped outside. The night air was cold, biting against my skin, but I barely noticed. My mind was numb, my heart aching with the weight of everything I'd lost, everything that had once been my anchor. I found myself heading down the familiar path to the stable, my legs carrying me forward on instinct alone. When I reached the stable, Charlie was waiting, his dark eyes watching me with a gentle understanding that nearly brought me to my knees. I stumbled over to him, my hands reaching out to steady myself against his warmth, and the dam inside me broke. Tears spilled over, hot and silent, as I clung to him, feeling the weight of my shattered heart pour out in waves. I don't know what to do. Charlie, I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. I thought he loved me. I thought we'd built something real, something that could survive anything. But now I don't know. Charlie nudged my shoulder softly, his warm breath a comfort against the cold night air. I let my fingers tangle in his mane, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breaths beneath my hand in his presence. Pain eased, if only slightly, and I felt a flicker of solace, a reminder that even in my darkest moments I wasn't alone. As I sank down beside him, I realized how much I'd come to rely on Charlie, how deeply his quiet strength had anchored me in the midst of my storm. He was my constant, my refuge, the one place where I felt truly seen, truly valued. I could feel the warmth of his body, the gentle thud of his heartbeat grounding me, soothing the raw edges of my hurt. I sat with him in the silence, letting the weight of the night settle around me for the first time. I allowed myself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I could find peace even without Theodore, that maybe the love I had for Charlie, for myself, was enough to see me through. I thought about my evening with Emma. I took one look at Charlie and that was it, another evening session, and it was amazing. The night stretched on, and as dawn approached, I felt something shift inside me. It was subtle, barely a whisper. But it was there, a quiet resolve, a glimmer of strength I hadn't known I possessed. I realized then that no matter what happened with Theodore, I would survive this. I would heal, rebuild, and move forward. And as I looked into Charlie's steady gaze, I knew that he would be there beside me every step of the way. My story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening and see you in the next videos.